The halls of the Zarathi Palace were known for their silence. The high walls carved from living crystal usually shimmered with calm blue light. Soft winds from the gardens often carried the scent of glowing flowers. But on this day, nothing was calm. The sound that filled the halls was sharp, loud, and endless. The baby princess was crying. Her cry was not like the cry of a human child. It was higher, sharper, almost like a ringing bell that never stopped. The sound traveled through the air, bouncing against the crystal walls and echoing again and again. Servants covered their ears. Guards shifted uneasily in their armor. Even the queen herself, strong and proud, looked tired and pale. Queen Zara sat on her throne, her long silver robes pooling around her. Her crown of woven light glowed faintly, but her eyes showed exhaustion. She cradled her daughter, Princess Alira, close to her chest. The baby's skin shimmered with faint green light, a mark of royal Zarathi blood, but her little face was twisted in distress and her tiny arms waved helplessly as she cried and cried. The queen's healers were gathered in the room. They had already tried everything. They had sung the sacred songs, burned calming herbs, and even placed the baby inside a healing cocoon of soft energy. Nothing worked. The crying continued without pause, as if the baby herself refused the help of her own people. One of the advisors, a tall Zarathi with golden skin, stepped forward. "My queen," he said, bowing low, "the child may be sick. Perhaps we should summon the priests. They may know if a spirit is troubling her." "No," Queen Zara replied firmly. Her voice, even tired, carried authority. "This is not a spirit's doing. This is something else." "But what?" She looked down at her baby, her lips pressed tight. The queen had led armies and faced dangers across the stars, yet this, her daughter's endless tears, was something she did not know how to battle. In the far corner of the throne room stood a visitor. He was not Zarathi. His skin was soft and pale, his hair short and brown. He wore a simple dark suit with a silver emblem of Earth on his chest. His name was Daniel Ward, a human envoy sent to discuss peace and trade with the Zarathi Empire. Daniel had been standing quietly since the cries began. He did not speak out of turn, for humans were seen as young and fragile compared to the mighty Zarathi. To them, Earth was still a small world, a child among stars. Yet Daniel's eyes were filled with concern. He had seen children cry before. His sister's children back on Earth, his little nieces and nephews. Their cries were different, but the feeling was the same. A baby in distress, a little one who needed comfort. The queen's eyes scanned the room, and for the first time she noticed him. "Human," she said, her voice echoing. "You hear this? Even your weak ears must feel the sharpness of her cry." Daniel bowed respectfully. "Yes, Your Majesty, I hear her." The queen's lips tightened. "You come from a race that knows little of us. Tell me, what do humans do when their young cry for hours?" Daniel hesitated. The eyes of every Zarathi in the room turned toward him. He felt small beneath their glowing stares. Still, he gathered his courage and spoke softly. "On Earth, when a baby cries and nothing seems wrong, and we hold them, we rock them gently. Sometimes we sing. Sometimes they only need to feel safe in someone's arms." The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted with soft laughter. The advisors whispered to one another. "How simple, how foolish. He thinks a royal child is like a farm animal. Humans, always clinging to touch." Daniel's face flushed red, but he kept his head bowed. He was used to the Zarathi's pride. Queen Zara, however, did not laugh. She looked down at her daughter, who was still wailing in her arms, and a shadow of doubt crossed her face. "You believe touch will stop this storm?" she asked him. Daniel lifted his eyes and met hers with steady calm. "I don't know if it will work, Your Majesty, but sometimes a baby doesn't need medicine or songs. Sometimes they only need warmth." The queen's long silver fingers tightened around her child. She hesitated. To let a fragile human hold the royal heir was unthinkable. No alien had ever touched the princess except her people, but the crying had lasted for so long. The queen herself had no answer left. Her advisors protested at once. "Majesty, this is dangerous. What if he harms the child? Humans are not trained in our ways." But Queen Zera raised her hand, silencing them. Her glowing eyes fixed on Daniel. "Very well, human," she said at last. "Come forward. Show us your so-called human way." Daniel stepped forward, slowly. His heart pounded in his chest. He had faced difficult negotiations before, but this was different. He was about to hold the daughter of an alien queen, the most precious life in the empire. He bowed once more and carefully stretched out his arms. The queen studied him for a long moment. Then, with great care, she placed the tiny, glowing child into his hands. Daniel held her gently, the way he had held his nieces and nephews on Earth. He supported her head, cradled her body close to his chest, and began to sway softly on his feet. His voice, low and calm, began to hum a simple tune. It was not a song of power or ancient wisdom, just a quiet lullaby his mother once sang to him. The effect was slow at first. The princess's cries wavered, still sharp but shorter. Then her little glowing eyes blinked up at him. The sound of her wailing faded, replaced by soft hiccups. A moment later, silence filled the throne room. Everyone stared in disbelief. The endless crying that had shaken the palace for hours had stopped. The baby's tiny hands reached up and touched Daniel's chin. She made a small sound, half sigh, half coo, and nestled against his chest. Daniel kept rocking her gently, his own eyes soft with relief. He whispered, "That's it, little one. You're safe." The queen's advisors stood frozen. Some had their mouths open. Others shook their heads, unable to accept what they were seeing. The royal healers looked at one another in confusion, their tools and chants forgotten. Queen Zera herself rose from her throne, her eyes wide with wonder. For the first time in hours, her daughter was quiet, peaceful, resting as if the storm had never been. The queen stepped closer, her long robes trailing behind her. She looked at Daniel, at the fragile human who now held the heir of the empire with such simple ease. Her voice, soft yet heavy with meaning, filled the room. "What have you done?" Daniel glanced up, meeting her gaze. He did not claim power. He did not boast. He only said with quiet honesty, "I only held her majesty." And in that moment, the great Zerathi palace was silent, save for the soft, steady breath of a sleeping child. The silence in the throne room lasted longer than anyone expected. For hours, the palace had been filled with sharp cries, and now there was only peace. The baby princess slept soundly against the chest of a human man. The queen's advisors did not know how to react. Some still stared in disbelief, others exchanged nervous whispers. The healers lowered their glowing tools, their pride quietly shaken. Queen Zera stepped closer, her long shadow stretching across the polished crystal floor. She studied the human carefully, as if searching for hidden tricks. Her glowing eyes, deep green and gold, settled on the child in his arms. "She is quiet," the queen said at last, her voice filled with both wonder and suspicion. Daniel bowed his head slightly, careful not to disturb the sleeping infant. "Yes, Majesty. She is only resting." "Explain yourself," the queen demanded. "What sorcery is this? You touched her and her storm ended." Daniel shook his head. His voice was calm and low. "It is not sorcery, Your Majesty. On Earth, when babies cry and no cure seems to work, we hold them. We keep them close. Sometimes they need to hear a heartbeat, to feel warmth, to know they are not alone." The queen's advisors muttered again. One of them, a tall Zerathi noble, with golden skin, stepped forward. His name was Orcs. He bowed but spoke sharply. "Majesty, this cannot be trusted. The human may carry strange energy. Perhaps the silence is only a trick. We cannot risk the life of the heir." Another advisor, a woman with sapphire markings on her cheeks, agreed. "If the child depends on the human's presence, what happens when he leaves? This is dangerous. But the queen silenced them with a raised hand. Her eyes never left Daniel. Human, you say this is a practice of your kind? Daniel nodded. Yes, your majesty. It is common among humans. Our young are small and fragile. They cannot survive on their own. So parents carry them often. They rock them, they sing to them, they speak gently. It is not medicine, it is care. The queen tilted her head, curious. She had lived through battles, councils, and long nights of ruling an empire. Yet this idea that something as simple as touch could calm a child was new to her. Among the Scifi, infants were placed in glowing cocoons cared for by nurses and energy healers. Rarely did rulers hold their children for long. To touch was considered almost ceremonial, not a daily act of comfort. Show me, Queen Zara commanded. Daniel looked uncertain. Majesty, show me what you do, she said. If this is no trick, then I must learn it myself. Slowly, Daniel stepped forward and bowed. He carefully offered the baby back to her. Princess Alira stirred slightly but did not cry. The queen held her close but awkwardly, as if she were holding a fragile stone instead of her own child. Daniel spoke, softly. May I guide you? The queen gave a short nod. Her advisors looked horrified at the suggestion that a human would instruct their ruler, but no one dared interrupt. Daniel moved slowly, respectful of her rank. Hold her head like this. Yes. And keep her body close to your chest. Rock gently, side to side. He demonstrated with his hands. The queen imitated his motions, stiff at first, but then a little smoother. The baby sighed, her tiny fingers curling against the queen's robe. A soft sound, almost like a purr, escaped her. For the first time, Queen Zara saw her daughter relax fully in her own arms. The queen's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly. She had faced many victories in her life, but this, her baby finally, at peace, felt like something greater than all. She responds, the queen whispered. She hears me. Daniel nodded. Yes, Majesty. She knows your voice. She knows your touch. The queen looked down at her daughter for a long while, silent. Then she raised her head and addressed her court. This human speaks truth. My child is calm. Her words rippled through the room like a storm. Some advisors looked uneasy. Others lowered their heads in respect. But Orath, the golden-skinned noble, frowned deeply. Majesty, Orath said, to place faith in a human's strange method is unwise. What if it weakens our heir? What if this dependence makes her fragile? The queen's gaze sharpened. Enough. The heir is mine to protect. If human ways can bring her peace, then we will not ignore them. Daniel bowed again, careful not to show pride. He had not come to the palace to show superiority. He had only wanted to help. Yet he could feel the weight of the moment. In a room filled with beings of great power, his simple human act had changed everything. For the rest of that day, the queen kept her daughter close. Daniel remained in the palace nearby in case he was needed again. Servants watched with curiosity as their ruler paced the halls, rocking her child softly in her arms. The sound of the baby's cries did not return. That night, the queen summoned Daniel privately. Her throne room was empty except for her and the sleeping princess, who now rested peacefully in a cradle of light. You, human, Queen Zara said, her tone softer than before. You have shown me something my people have forgotten. I have led armies, conquered worlds, and studied the wisdom of countless stars, but today I could not calm my own child without your help. That is a humbling truth. Daniel bowed his head. Majesty, I only shared what I know. It is not greatness. It is simply what we do. The queen studied him closely. Perhaps it is simple to you, but sometimes simple things hold power greater than armies. My daughter is proof of that. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. The queen's eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. Then she turned back to Daniel. Tomorrow you will show me more. I want to know how humans care for their young. Teach me what you know. Daniel hesitated. You wish to learn From me? Yes, the queen said firmly. You are fragile in body, but your kind must have strength of another sort. I want to understand it. Daniel felt a strange warmth in his chest. He had come as an envoy, not a teacher. Yet now, the most powerful being in the Zarathi Empire was asking him to share the ways of his people. He bowed deeply. As you wish, Majesty. I will do my best. The queen gave a slow nod, her silver crown glimmering in the soft light. Then tomorrow we begin. As Daniel left the throne room that night, he felt the weight of a new responsibility. He was no longer only a guest or a negotiator. Somehow, in a palace of crystal and light, he had become something else, a bridge between worlds. And in the quiet cradle of the royal chamber, the baby princess slept soundly, her soft breath a promise of change yet to come. Morning light streamed through the tall crystal windows of the Zarathi palace. The halls glowed with soft colors, reflecting the rising sun of the alien world. Servants walked quickly, their steps quiet on the polished floor. Guards stood tall, their armor shining. But for once the palace was not filled with the sound of crying. It was filled with peace. Princess Alira had slept through the night. When Queen Zara entered the throne room with her daughter in her arms, all eyes followed her. The baby's face was calm, her small glowing eyes half closed, her breath soft and steady. The healers bowed their heads in shame, for they had failed to calm her. The advisors whispered among themselves, wondering if the child's peace would last. At the center of the room stood Daniel, the human envoy. He bowed respectfully as the queen approached. His dark suit looked plain compared to the flowing robes of the Zarathi, but the weight of attention rested on him. The courtiers looked at him not with dismissal as they had before, but with curiosity, and some with suspicion. The queen's voice echoed in the hall. Human, today you will show me what you promised. Teach me the ways of your kind. Daniel nodded. Yes, Majesty. I will show you what I can. He looked around the vast throne room, with its tall columns and glowing crystals. It was a place built for grand speeches and councils of war, not for the quiet lessons of raising a child. Yet this was where the queen wished to learn. And so he began. Majesty, Daniel said carefully, in my world, caring for a baby is not about strength or science alone. It is about closeness. Babies cannot speak words, but they speak with their cries, their faces, their movements. Parents learn to understand these small signs. The queen tilted her head. You mean the sounds and gestures have meaning? Yes, Daniel said. When they are hungry, their cry is different. When they are tired, it is softer. When they want comfort, they reach out. Each cry tells a story. The queen's eyes narrowed in thought. She looked down at her daughter, who stirred, lightly in her arms. I never thought of it as language. To us, it was only noise. Sometimes, Daniel said with a gentle smile, the smallest voices speak the loudest truths. The queen was silent for a moment. Then she asked, Show me more. So Daniel began to guide her. He showed her how to cradle the child so the baby's head was supported. He demonstrated the gentle sway that helped children feel calm, as if they were back in the safety of the womb. He explained how to hum simple tones, not for meaning but for rhythm and comfort. At first the queen's motions were stiff. Her arms, trained to carry weapons and command armies, felt awkward when rocking a fragile infant. But slowly, with Daniel's patient guidance, she grew more natural. The baby seemed to sense it. Alira's tiny hands reached for her mother's robe, and a small sound of contentment rose from her lips. The queen looked down, surprised. She clings to me. She knows you, Daniel said softly. She trusts you. The words touched the queen more deeply than she expected. She had been taught that rulers must stand apart, that even family must be seen as part of duty. But holding her daughter this way, feeling the tiny warmth against her chest, she felt something greater than duty. She felt love in its purest form. The advisors shifted uncomfortably. One of them, Orath, stepped forward. His golden skin glimmered in the light. "Majesty, forgive me, but this seems unworthy of your station. A queen should not lower herself to act like a nurse. The heir must be raised in strength, not coddled with human softness." The queen's eyes flashed, and for a moment the hall grew colder. "Would you have me ignore the peace of my child?" she asked sharply. "Would you have me return to endless cries when silence is within reach?" Orath bowed quickly, his voice stiff. "Of course not, Majesty. I only speak for the dignity of the throne." "Dignity," the queen repeated, her voice steady. "There is no greater dignity than caring for one's child." Daniel stood silently, letting her words hold the weight they deserved. Over the next days, Daniel continued to teach. He showed the queen how to lay the baby gently across her shoulder, so the little one could rest while hearing her mother's heartbeat. He explained the importance of gentle touch, how even the smallest stroke on a baby's hand or back could bring comfort. He even taught her a simple earth lullaby, though he changed the words to neutral sounds so she would not feel bound by human language. The queen listened carefully to every lesson. At first, she practiced only when Daniel was near. But soon the palace staff began to notice something strange. In the evenings, Queen Zara could be seen walking the crystal gardens, with her daughter in her arms humming softly. At night, she would keep the baby near her rather than leaving her in the energy cocoon. The palace was astonished. Never before had a Zarathi monarch been seen holding her child so often. It became a quiet subject of conversation among the servants and guards. Some admired it, others questioned it, but no one could deny the result. The princess was calmer, healthier, and more alert than before. One evening, as Daniel walked with the queen through the garden, she asked him, "Do all humans do this? Do all of your kind hold their children so closely?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Most do, some better than others. But in general, yes. We believe children need more than food and protection. They need to feel love. They need to feel safe." The queen considered his words. Love, safety. We have words for those things, but we do not connect them to child rearing. We trust our science, our healers. Yet you claim this. Warmth is just as important. "I believe it is," Daniel said. "A child who grows up knowing love will grow strong in ways no weapon can teach." The queen looked at her daughter, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms. For the first time in many weeks, the queen's face softened with a small, genuine smile. But not all hearts in the palace were warmed. Orath and several other advisors grew restless. They gathered in secret chambers, whispering their doubts. "This is dangerous," one muttered. "The queen listens to the human as if his words are law." "The people may see weakness in her actions," another said. "If they believe their ruler relies on a fragile alien, unrest will spread." Orath's eyes burned with quiet anger. "We must be careful. A single human should not shape the heart of our empire." Back in the royal chambers, however, the Ayur queen cared little for whispers. She continued to practice what she had learned. Each time her daughter reached for her, each time the cries softened into sighs, she felt her bond with the child deepen. And each time she silently acknowledged the strange truth. The fragile human had brought her something more powerful than all her advisors' wisdom. Daniel, too, felt the change. He had come to the Zarathi Empire as a diplomat, prepared only for talks of trade and treaties. But now, he found himself teaching lessons far more personal. Each time the queen thanked him, each time the princess calmed in his presence, he realized that humans might have something truly unique to give the galaxy. Not machines or armies, but something simple, something quiet, warmth. As the days passed, word began to spread beyond the palace walls. Stories whispered through the capital city, stories of how the human envoy had calmed the royal child when no healer could. Some laughed at the tale, others felt wonder, and many began to ask themselves, if humans could do this, what else might they offer? The queen stood at her balcony one night, her daughter in her arms, looking out over her empire. She knew change was coming, and for the first time in many years she felt hope. The Zarathi Empire was vast, stretching across multiple star systems. Its cities gleamed like jewels, and its people prided themselves on strength, logic, and tradition. Yet in the capital, a quiet change was stirring, one that began in the glowing halls of the royal palace with a human and a baby. Queen Zara had become a student of human ways. Each day she practiced what Daniel had taught her. She cradled her daughter, hummed soft tones, and watched for every tiny signal the ID princess gave. Slowly she learned patience in ways her empire had never demanded. Slowly she learned warmth. Daniel remained at her side, guiding her carefully. He did not act like a servant or an advisor. He was gentle, respectful, and calm, a presence that seemed to soothe not only the child but the queen herself. But not all eyes welcomed this change. Orath, the golden-skinned noble, watched from his tower with suspicion. "The queen is abandoning centuries of tradition," he muttered to the other council members. "She listens to a human as if he knows the ways of our empire better than we do." Another advisor, a stern woman named Saria, shook her head. "Perhaps the child will grow soft, dependent on human ways. How can we maintain strength if our future ruler is fragile?" Orath's eyes narrowed. "We must watch carefully. This is not just about a baby. This is about influence. If a human can sway the queen in matters of the heart, who knows what else he might affect?" Meanwhile in the palace, the queen was unaware of the rising unease. She sat in the glowing garden with her daughter in her arms while Daniel explained a new lesson. "Majesty," he said, "babies can also feel moods. If you are anxious, she may sense it. If you are calm, she feels safety. That is why parents, in my world, often try to stay relaxed when caring for children." The queen nodded. "It is strange, yet true. I feel more connected to her, and in return she seems more connected to me." Daniel smiled. "It is a bond that is simple, but very strong. Love and attention are a kind of strength humans often value over skill or power." Princess Alira cooed softly, reaching for Daniel's hand. The queen watched, a small smile forming on her face. The child's trust in Daniel was undeniable. She realized that strength could take many forms, not only in power or wisdom but also in care, patience, and connection. The next day, Daniel taught the queen a new exercise. He guided her in walking slowly through the palace corridors while holding her daughter, explaining how gentle movement and soft words could make a child feel safe even in unfamiliar spaces. By the end of the day, the princess was calmer than ever. Her coos and small laughter filled the halls instead of her cries. Servants paused to watch, amazed by the transformation. The healers nodded quietly, acknowledging that their science alone had never achieved this peace. Outside the palace, the city was abuzz. Word had spread of the human who had calmed the royal child. Rumors traveled quickly. Some people were skeptical, dismissing it as a fluke. Others were fascinated. Could humans truly possess a power beyond strength and technology? Among the elite, however, dissent grew. Orath and his allies whispered constantly, "If the queen favors human ways, what becomes of tradition?" Orath asked, his voice low but sharp. "The empire may follow her example. What then? Weakness disguised as kindness?" Saria's expression was grim. "We must act carefully. Influence spreads quickly. If humans gain respect here, it could change everything." The queen, for her part, remained focused on her child. She noticed the quiet shifts in the palace but refused to let them disturb her. Each time Princess Alira laughed or rested peacefully in her arms, Zara felt a certainty she had never known. In her long years of ruling, perhaps strength and care could exist together. Perhaps human ways had value beyond their fragile forms. One afternoon, as the sun glimmered against the crystal towers, Daniel suggested a new approach. "Majesty, there are other ways to bond with a child. Play, for instance, is important. On Earth, children learn about the world through small games. They explore and gain confidence even while remaining safe. The queen raised an eyebrow. Play? My daughter is too young for games. Daniel shook his head. Even small gestures count. Soft touches, gentle movements, objects to hold. It helps the child feel secure and learn trust. The queen considered this and began to experiment. She placed a small glowing orb in front of her daughter, allowing her tiny hands to touch it. She hummed gently while moving the orb slowly back and forth. Alira's eyes widened and a small sound of delight escaped her lips. The queen laughed softly, something rare and warm for the palace. It is simple. Yet she seemed so happy. Yes, Majesty, Daniel said. Even simple things teach trust and connection. The impact of these lessons reached beyond the walls of the palace. Servants began adopting some of the practices with their own children, and whispers of human influence spread further. People began to reconsider what they had believed about strength. Perhaps there was power in gentleness, resilience in patience, and courage in love. Yet the court remained divided. Orcs continued to plot in secret, concerned that the queen's reliance on human methods could weaken the empire's unity. He approached several council members urging caution. Do not underestimate this human, he warned. The queen listens. The people notice. We must ensure tradition survives. Despite the warnings, more advisors quietly observed the effects. The princess was healthier, calmer, and even growing more alert. People began to question whether centuries of strict tradition had ignored the true needs of children. Could there be wisdom in human ways? One evening, the queen sat in her chambers holding her daughter and reflecting on the past weeks. Daniel was beside her, explaining new methods of interaction. She listened intently, following his guidance, and noticed how her daughter responded. Daniel, she said softly, I never imagined that something so simple could have such power. My daughter? She is thriving in ways I could not predict. Daniel smiled. It is the bond, Majesty. The bond between parent and child. Humans value it above all else. And it seems your daughter values it too. The queen looked down at her. Baby. Alira's small fingers curled around her robe, her eyes wide and curious. The warmth in Zara's chest grew, filling her with a new sense of purpose. Not only was she a ruler, but she was also a mother, learning in ways she had never considered. As night fell, the palace glimmered under twin moons. Outside, whispers of change spread quietly through the city. Citizens began to see that humans might offer more than mere weakness. They offered connection, empathy, and care. Even those who remained skeptical could not deny the growing influence of this fragile species. Within the palace, the queen's trust in Daniel deepened. She saw his patience, his calm demeanor, and the way the princess responded to him. Though he was small and delicate by Zarathi standards, he possessed a strength of a different kind, a strength that touched hearts, healed unrest, and inspired hope. And as the days passed, the queen realized that trust could cross species. That strength was not only in power or skill, but also in care, in patience, in simple acts of love. The empire was beginning to see that humans could be allies not because of weapons or technology, but because of something more fundamental, the quiet, unyielding power of the heart. The Zarathi Empire was restless. News of the human envoy's success in calming the royal baby had traveled far beyond the palace walls. Citizens whispered in marketplaces and crowded streets. A human had brought peace to the heir of the empire. Many were curious, some skeptical, and a few even angry. Within the palace, tension had reached its peak. Orath, the golden-skinned noble, had gathered other influential advisors. They worried that the queen's growing trust in Daniel and his EU methods was changing more than just the royal household. It was changing the empire. We cannot allow the future of Zarathi's strength to be determined by a human, Orath said sharply. The people may see weakness where none should exist. We must act. Saria, the stern advisor, nodded. Perhaps the queen's reliance on him will spread. If our heirs grow soft, the empire may crumble. Yet even as they spoke outside the palace walls, citizens began to notice a subtle difference. The streets were calmer, children were happier, parents were talking more softly, teaching patience, and paying attention to small gestures of care. Some began to wonder if the human methods, simple though they were bringing a kind of strength the empire had never seen. Inside the throne room, Queen Zera held her daughter, Princess Alira, close. The child had grown more confident, more alert, and her once sharp cries had become soft coos and laughter. The queen's eyes, usually fierce and commanding, softened as she looked down at her child. Daniel stood nearby, ready to assist if needed. He had taught the queen every lesson he knew, from cradling techniques to gentle lullabies. The bond between human and baby was undeniable. Alira had come to trust him, reaching for him with small hands and calming at his presence. The queen rose, to speak to her council. "Enough of whispers and doubt," she declared, her voice carrying through the hall. "The child is thriving. Her strength is growing, not through force, not through isolation, but through care and love. This is the way she must learn to trust, to grow, and to lead. And yes, humans have played a part." Oreth's jaw tightened. "Majesty, the people may see this as weakness. To allow a human such influence over the air," the queen's eyes burned with determination. "And to deny care is cruelty. To deny learning is folly. If strength comes from fear alone, then our empire is already lost. We will not fear simple truth because it comes from a human." The council fell silent. The queen's words were strong, clear, and impossible to ignore. That evening, the queen made a bold decision. She asked the palace heralds to prepare a public announcement. Citizens gathered in the Grand Plaza, curious and tense. The streets were lined with guards, their eyes scanning for any sign of unrest, but the air was filled with anticipation. Queen Zera appeared on the balcony holding Princess Alira in her arms. The baby was calm, resting against her mother's chest, and for the first time in many days she smiled in full view of the crowd. Daniel stood beside the queen, quiet but present, offering support. "My people," the queen began, her voice carrying to every corner of the plaza, "today you see something unusual. Our empire has long valued strength, wisdom, and skill. Yet today I show you another kind of strength, a strength of the heart. My daughter, your future princess, has been cared for not by force, not by fear, but by simple kindness." The crowd murmured in surprise. Many had expected a speech of power or conquest, but this was different. "This child," the queen continued, "has learned trust, calm, and courage through care. She has been guided by a human who showed patience, warmth, and understanding. We do not reject our traditions, but we also embrace what is good, wherever it comes from. Let this be a new beginning, for our children, for our empire, and for the bonds we build across worlds." The plaza was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, people began to cheer. Some clapped their hands, others smiled at one another. The story of the human who calmed the princess had already spread, but now it was confirmed before the eyes of everyone. Back in the palace, Oreth clenched his fists. "The queen has gone too far," he muttered. "But perhaps even, the people see the truth in it." Saria remained silent, watching as the citizens responded with warmth instead of fear. Even she had to admit that there was a power in this new way. Quiet, unseen, and gentle, yet undeniable. Days passed, and the bond between Queen Zera, her daughter, and Daniel continued to grow. The baby's laughter filled the halls, a sound previously unknown. The queen found joy not only in ruling her empire but in nurturing her child. Each night she held Alira close, humming the simple tunes Daniel had taught her, and the child would drift into calm sleep, confident and secure. Daniel, too, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come to the Zerathi Empire as a diplomat, expecting only to negotiate treaties. Instead, he had helped change hearts, teach a queen, and touch the life of the heir to an empire. Humans were often underestimated for their size and fragility, but Daniel realized that this small gift, kindness, attention, warmth, was a power unlike any other. The queen noticed the change in her people as well. Parents in the city began to care more for their children. Servants in the palace followed the human lessons, finding that even small acts of patience brought harmony. Slowly, the empire began to shift. Strength was no longer measured by might alone, but also by empathy and care. One afternoon, as Daniel walked through the palace gardens with the queen and her daughter, she turned to him. "You have taught me more than I expected, Daniel. Not just about caring for a child, but about leadership, trust, and connection. I see now that strength can take many forms." Daniel smiled softly. "Majesty, you have always been strong. You simply allowed yourself to see another way," the baby cooed, reaching for Daniel's hand. He bent down and her small fingers grasped his. The queen watched, her heart full. It was a simple moment, but one that carried the weight of change. As the sun set, painting the palace towers in warm light, the queen addressed her court once more. "Let it be known that humans are welcome in our empire, not as conquerors, but as allies, as teachers, and as friends. Let our future be built not on fear or domination, but on understanding, trust, and care." Her words echoed through the halls, reaching every corner of the empire. And in that moment, a new era began. Daniel prepared to return to Earth, his mission of diplomacy now complete. Yet the queen stopped him at the gates of the palace. "You will not go far," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Alira has grown to know you. She loves you, and I wish you to visit often." Daniel nodded, honored. "I will, Majesty. I will return." The queen smiled, holding her daughter close. "Good, for she will always remember the human who held her when she needed comfort the most." The palace was filled with quiet joy. The child's laughter echoed, a new sound of hope. The queen, strong and wise, understood that this small human had done what no army or technology could. He had taught her and her people the power of care. Outside, the citizens of the empire continued to speak in whispers of amazement. A human had brought peace to their future princess. And slowly the hearts of many began to open, realizing that strength was not only in skill or force, but also in the quiet, gentle acts that connected one being to another. And so in a palace of crystal and light, under twin moons, and the endless stars, the queen, her daughter, and the human envoy stood together, a symbol of trust, friendship, and a new beginning for the Zarathi Empire. It was a beginning that promised hope, unity, and the quiet but unstoppable power of love.